Hey, good morning, folks. Pastor Stephen back again with another No Frills daily devotional. And today's topic is titled Fight the Flow. Actually, I wanted to title it Sanctified Salmon, but I thought maybe that was a little too far out there for a title. But it's going in this direction, the same direction that Peter's been going. I've been tracking through the book, First Peter. And he is coming at us with this idea of we need to fight the pressure to fit in, right? And he's trying to encourage first century believers because there's a lot of pressure on them to fit in, or another way that he says it, to conform to the way of the world. All right, but I'm going to take you to the text right away today, and I'm going to let Peter do the talking here at the beginning. All right, and so this is First Peter. I'm in chapter 2 today, and I'm going to read verses 11 and 12. And Peter writes this. He says, "Dear friends, I urge you." Now listen to the language that he uses here. He says, "as aliens and strangers in the world." Okay? It's this idea that we were not called to fit in. Okay? We were not created to fit in to the way of the world. Rather, we were called to stand out. Okay, more on that to come. All right. So to abstain, all right, to abstain means to stay away from the sinful desires which war against your soul. Now listen to how he finishes this. Live such good lives among the pagans, and pagans are just people that weren't followers of Christ, okay? That though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us, right? And so it's this idea that Peter wants to keep hitting at, that there is a lot of pressure for these first century believers to fit in, to conform to the culture that they live in, to conform to the way of the world. Because remember, they're facing beatings, they're facing imprisonment. Peter himself has a death warrant out on his life, all right? And so there's this pressure to fit in, to just fall into line what everybody else is doing. Don't go against the flow kind of thing. And Peter is saying, no, that's not how you were called to live, right? And what he's trying to put out there is there's two models. Okay, you can either conform to the way of the world, or you can conform to the way of Jesus. And one of those models is going to lead to death. The other model is going to lead to life. And I bet you can figure out which one is which, right? And so it's conforming to the model of Jesus. That's what he's going to keep encouraging these first century believers. Don't give in to the world. Don't conform to the world. Rather, conform to the model that Jesus lived for us. And I talked a little bit about that, what that looks like, a life of purity, a life of obedience, a life of love in a previous episode, right? But there is this pressure to fit in, because Peter's going to write again kind of the same concept in the same letter, but this is First Peter chapter 4, verse 4, watch what he says. He says they think it's strange. He's talking about the pagans again, the non-Christians, the non-believers. They think it's strange that you do not plunge with them into the same flood of dissipation, and they heap abuse on you, right? So he's not sugarcoating this. He knows that there is pressure for these first century believers to fit in, but that's not gonna slow a guy like Peter down, right? He wants us to face that pressure head on. He wants us to fight the flow like sanctified salmon. He wants us swimming upstream. He wants us to go against the current that everybody else is falling into, right? That's what his challenge is, right? Because what model are you conforming to? Are you giving into the way of the world, which is going to lead to death and destruction? Or are you giving into the model that Jesus lived for you? Okay, one that's going to produce a rich, full life for you, right? Because here's what he's trying to hit at, and he talks a little bit about it in chapter 2 here, but the way that they can withstand and fight against this pressure to fit in is to keep in mind the goal of standing out. right? And that's what I want to hit at just for a little bit here. The goal of standing out is what he keeps putting in front of them. Now, the goal of standing out, okay, brace yourself, isn't individualism, okay? That's what the world would have us believe, that you should stand out, you should do your own thing, you should live your own life, right? That's still the way of the world, believe it or not, that everybody else is doing that is still leading to death and destruction. So Peter is not standing here promoting rampant individualism, okay? Okay, that's what we got to be careful of here. Rather, what he's saying, he says the goal of standing out is drawing attention not to yourself, but to Jesus, okay? And that's kind of what he's saying in chapter 2 there of First Peter, in how he says that they may see your good deeds and glorify God, okay? That's the goal of standing out, that they see your life and glorify God. And Jesus made a very similar statement. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. This is my life verse. I've got this written right in the front of my Bible. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven, right? The goal of standing out is to draw attention to Jesus. And Jesus even goes on to say, this is John chapter 12, verse 32. And he says, but I, Jesus is talking about himself here, but I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to myself. And so the way that you fight that pressure to fit in is to keep in mind the goal of standing out, which isn't to draw attention to you. It's to draw attention to Jesus, to bring glory to God. Hey, you guys, I hope you're doing well. Have an awesome